Welcome to the Atlantic Perspectives podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the White House and Europe with Maxime Lobé. In the previous episode, we left the US under the presidency of Andrew Jackson, a president who profoundly transforms American political life by presenting himself as the defender of ordinary people against the elites of Washington. But Jackson's legacy goes beyond his decisions and his style of government. He also helps reshape the American political landscape for generations to come. At the beginning of the 19th century, political parties remain relatively fragile. Rivalries exist, but they are often organized around personalities rather than truly national organizations. By the late 1830s, the situation is different. Two major parties now dominate American political life. On one side are the Democrats, heirs to Jackson, and supporters of limited federal government. On the other are the Whigs, who criticize what they see as presidential excesses and favor a more active role for government in the nation's economic development. For the first time, the United States begins to resemble a true national two-party system. Election campaigns mobilize millions of voters, public rallies multiply, and political parties become permanent organizations. It is in this new America that three men succeed one another in the White House in less than 8 years: Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, and John Tyler. Three very different presidents, but together they illustrate the growing power of political parties in American democracy. March 1837, Washington, D.C. Martin Van Buren takes the oath of office as the 8th President of the United States. For the first time in the nation's history, a president succeeds another president from the same party after 2 full terms. Standing beside him is Andrew Jackson, his loyal ally and chosen political heir. After 2 terms of Andrew Jackson, Democrats naturally turn to his closest ally as their next candidate. Martin Van Buren wins the election of 1836. He's a political organizer. He plays a key role in building the Democratic Party and in creating the two-party system that now dominates American politics. But only weeks after arriving in the White House, his administration is struck by a major economic crisis. In 1837, banks close, businesses fail, and unemployment rises rapidly. This crisis, known as the Panic of 1837, plunges the country into several years of economic hardship. To many Americans, the crisis first appears to be a domestic problem. Yet its causes extend far beyond the borders of the United States. At the time, the United Kingdom is the world's leading economic power. London is the financial center of the world, and British capital finances a significant part of American development, particularly in banking, trade, and railroads. When economic conditions worsen in Britain, British banks reduce their overseas investments. The flow of capital to the United States slows dramatically, weakening an economy already facing serious internal problems. For the first time, Americans discover how much their prosperity depends on events taking place across the Atlantic. The crisis reveals a new reality. Even as Washington continues to avoid political alliances with European powers, commercial and financial ties between the two continents are becoming increasingly important. On the diplomatic front, Van Buren must also manage a crisis with the United Kingdom. In 1837, rebellions break out in British Canada. Some insurgents find refuge in the US and receive support from American sympathizers. One of these groups uses a steamship called the Caroline to transport men and supplies across the Niagara River. In December 1837, British forces cross the border, seize the ship, set it on fire, and send it drifting toward Niagara Falls. The incident sparks outrage in the US. Many Americans denounce it as a violation of their sovereignty, and some even call for war with Britain. Less than a quarter century after the War of 1812, a new confrontation between London and Washington seems possible. Yet Martin Van Buren chooses caution. Despite public pressure, he refuses to escalate the crisis and strengthens measures designed to prevent American citizens from taking part in the Canadian rebellions. This policy helps avoid another war between the two countries and gradually prepares the way for a more stable relationship between Washington and London. But at home, the economic crisis continues to dominate his presidency. Despite his effort, Van Buren fails to restore prosperity before the next election. In 1840, voters turned to the opposition. The Whig Party wins the presidency for the first time in its history. The two-party system that emerges under Jackson is now fully established. For the first time, Democrats lose the White House to a nationally organized opposition party. The man preparing to enter the White House is a hero of the War of 1812. His name is William Henry Harrison. March 1841, Washington, D.C. William Henry Harrison takes the oath of office as the 9th President of the United States before a large crowd gathered at the Capitol. A former general of the War of 1812, he has just won one of the most remarkable presidential campaigns in American history. A few months earlier, the Whigs score a decisive victory against President Martin Van Buren. The election of 1840 illustrates the rapid evolution of American politics. The Whigs understand that to defeat the Democrats, they must use the same methods that made Andrew Jackson successful. They organize massive public rallies, promote simple slogans, and mobilize voters on a scale never seen before. Their candidate, William Henry Harrison, is presented as a common man living in a humble log cabin, even if the reality is more complicated. The strategy works. For the first time, Democrats lose the White House to a well-organized opposition party. Political alternation becomes a lasting reality in the US. But the Harrison presidency quickly turns into tragedy. On Inauguration Day, the new president delivers an unusually long speech in cold and rainy weather. A few weeks later, he becomes seriously ill. On the 4th of April 1841, only 1 month after taking office, William Henry Harrison dies in the White House. Never before has an American president died while serving in office. His death immediately raises an unprecedented constitutional question. Who now exercises presidential power? The Constitution states that presidential powers pass to the vice president in the event of a president's death. But it does not clearly specify whether the vice president becomes president or merely performs presidential duties temporarily. Vice President John Tyler decides the issue himself. April 1841, Washington, D.C. John Tyler takes the oath of office and declares that he is now President of the United States in his own right. The decision sparks criticism, but it is ultimately accepted. The precedent established by Tyler in 1841 is followed in every future presidential succession until it is formally incorporated into the Constitution more than a century later. Very quickly, Tyler finds himself politically isolated. Elected on the Whig ticket, Tyler actually shares few of the views held by many leaders of his own party. A Virginian committed to limited federal government, he opposes several major initiatives supported by Whig leaders in Congress. The tensions soon become open conflict. After several presidential vetoes, much of his cabinet resigns. The Whig Party eventually expels him from its ranks. For much of his presidency, John Tyler governs without genuine partisan support. This weakness at home contrasts with several important diplomatic successes. Since the War of 1812, a number of disputes still divide the US and the United Kingdom. Parts of the border with British Canada remain contested, especially in Maine. The Caroline Affair, during Van Buren's presidency, has also left tensions between Washington and London. In 1842, these issues are addressed through negotiations between Secretary of State Daniel Webster and British diplomat Lord Ashburton. The result is the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. The agreement permanently settles several sections of the border between the US and British Canada. It also helps ease tensions created by the Caroline Affair and improves cooperation between the two countries on several international issues. The treaty does not eliminate every disagreement between Washington and London, but it marks an important milestone. For the first time since the War of 1812, the two powers resolve a series of disputes through negotiation rather than confrontation. Anglo-American relations gradually enter a more stable period. But another issue is now attracting Washington's attention: Texas. Since gaining independence from Mexico in 1836, the Republic of Texas has existed as a sovereign state. The United States watches this young republic with great interest along its southwestern frontier. The United Kingdom is also paying close attention. London maintains diplomatic relations with Texas and sees its independence as a way to limit the expansion of American power across North America. In the United States, some leaders fear that lasting British influence could take root in the region. These concerns strengthen support for annexion. Toward the end of his presidency, John Tyler makes the admission of Texas into the Union one of his top priorities. In March 1845, just days before leaving office, he signs a resolution that opens the way for annexation. The decision profoundly changes the country's future. It increases tensions with Mexico, which still considers Texas a rebellious province. It also opens a new phase of American expansion toward the West. When John Tyler leaves office in 1845, the US stands on the edge of an era of unprecedented territorial growth. The man who succeeds Tyler intends to accelerate that process. His name is James Knox Polk. Martin Van Buren inherits the political movement created by Andrew Jackson and must confront a severe economic crisis. William Henry Harrison represents the first national victory of the Whig Party, but his presidency ends after only 1 month. John Tyler, meanwhile, governs in political isolation while strengthening America's position in North America. At first glance, this period may seem less dramatic than the eras of George Washington or Andrew Jackson. Yet, it marks an important stage in American political history. Democrats and Whigs established themselves as the nation's two dominant political forces. Election campaigns become national in scope. Political alternation becomes a lasting reality. And American institutions prove capable of surviving an unprecedented crisis with the death of a sitting president. On the international stage, the United States continues to avoid European alliances, but economic, diplomatic, and strategic ties with the old continent become increasingly visible. Finally, with the annexion of Texas, a new chapter begins. The United States look even further west. In the next episode, we will follow James Polk, one of the most ambitious presidents in American history, whose decisions transform the map of North America and bring the country closer to the debates that will eventually tear the Union apart. This was The White House in Europe with Maxime Lobé. Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast. You can find Atlantic Perspectives on social media and at atlanticperspective.org. Music licensed via Epidemic Sound.